In the last week's experiment, I showed you how to make a super simple but amazing sourdough bread. Now, that was just an experiment. And after all the great feedback you provided, I figured it's now time to take that experiment and turn that into a super simple recipe. And that's exactly what you will master with this video. I will show you how to make a simple but incredibly amazing sourdough bread in just 3 minutes of work. So if you think sourdough is too complicated, then please check out this recipe because it makes things so much simpler. So I would say 4 things that typically take a lot of work when making sourdough bread are the following. You have to knead your dough, you have to perform a couple of stretch and folds, you want to shape your dough in the end, and you also have to take care of sourdough starter maintenance. All this is cumbersome and it takes a lot of time. So with this recipe, we have to do nothing of this. Nada. Gar nichts. Nothing is required. This recipe is so simple, it really changes everything. So the idea of this recipe is actually super simple. It simulates what happens inside of your sourdough starter. People typically feed their sourdough starter and then at some point it increases in size. Sometimes it doubles or it triples. And we're trying to do exactly that. We're trying to create a gigantic sourdough starter bread pretty much. And the moment this has doubled in size, that's when we're trying to bake it. Now what you need to know about your sourdough starter is that over time it also becomes a little bit more fragile. So we have to be very careful. The same thing happens with your sourdough starter. At some point it just collapses. And we want to bake our bread before that because we want to have a little bit of oven spring. Now if all the sourdough starter madness doesn't make any sense to you, then please don't worry. I'm going to be linking a video right here on how to make an awesome sourdough starter. It's something super simple. You do it once and then you have a great starter for the rest of your life. It's really simple. So that's about the secret for this recipe. We're trying to make a gigantic starter, and this means that we will also go higher in terms of hydration. A sourdough starter typically has equal parts of flour and water, and that's what we are also doing in this video. We're going for a little bit less, but close to that. We'll have a very soupy dough in the end. And I'm telling you, this is so simple. Let's give it a shot. I'm adding 900 grams of bread flour, 20 grams of salt, 100 grams of sourdough starter, and 900 grams of water, room temperature water. Now I'm taking a spatula. You could also take your hands, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to stir this together to make it nice and homogenized. That's it. Note the consistency of the dough. It doesn't hold together that nicely. And all we do now, we put this into our greased loaf pan. I use the non-stick vegetable oil. Very important. This makes sure that our dough won't stick in the end. So normally I would be done faster, but you know, being German, we don't want anything to go to waste. So that's it for the recipe. Now I'm just extracting a tiny piece of the dough, which will allow me to monitor the fermentation progress. And once this has doubled in size, then we will just bake this bread. So that's the recipe. So simple, right? Now we just want to cover this up so that this doesn't dry out. If you don't have a fancy lid for your loaf pan like this, no worries. You could also just be using a plastic bag. That would totally work as well. So I marked my jar. This is where we are at right now, and this is my goal. And once we are here, then we are ready to bake the bread. No shaping, no stretch and folds in between. That's about it. And this here is so important because no matter how active your sourdough starter is, this will always tell you when your dough is done. This works for whole wheat, for spelt, for einkorn, for emmer, and for rye. Because we're not shaping, it's totally okay for it to double in size. For batard style bread, where you want to have a lot of oven spring and that beautiful ear, then you would have to go for a little bit of a less size increase. But for this bread, nope, doubling in size, and then we're gonna directly bake it. This is so simple. Everybody can do this. all the pain points of typical sourdough bread are gone with this simple recipe. And it's going to make us an amazing bread. One thing though, make sure that you use room temperature water or else this might cool down or heat up faster than your main dough. Also, if you homogenize a little bit more at the start, you make sure that you have an equal distribution of sourdough starter in this dough and in this tiny piece of the dough. So you might want to be homogenizing for a minute longer than I did. But let's see, I'm hoping anyways this is going to work out. I just wanted to show you the simplest and fastest approach. Hello, I'm back again and this is our dough. We do have a problem though, and that is that the sample jar in this case didn't work out. Because check how much the dough increased in size. This almost already doubled. But our sample jar has not. And now this can be because of multiple reasons, as I explained before. It might be that the temperature changed in the kitchen because now it's summer, it heats up a little bit faster, or I simply didn't homogenize this long enough. So if you have a loaf pan like this, which is of rectangular shape, just check the dough size increase inside of the loaf pan. That's even simpler. If you don't have a loaf pan like this, but more one that is shaped like this, then you will need to rely on the sample jar. Or you can get yourself a fancy tool like this pH meter, although this is quite expensive and the pH is now close to 4-ish. This means that our dough is very close to over fermentation. We have to bake this dough now, or else all that structure that we built now is just going to collapse, and that's not what we want. So let's put this in the oven. I'm super excited and I'm hoping that the theory actually works in practice. That would be so awesome. What you could do now is you could sprinkle a couple of seeds on top of it if you wanted to. That would totally work. But in this case, I prefer it to be rather plain. So no additional seeds on top. Just like that into the oven. And this is how the dough is going to bake. I'm not preheating the oven or anything. Now, if you don't have a fancy lid for your loaf pan, what you want to do is you want to have another tray here on top of your loaf pan. This way, all the water that evaporates is going to be trapped right below. And that creates a super humid environment, making sure that you don't form a crust too quickly and your dough is going to expand even more in the oven. This bread is so simple, no need to preheat the oven. I love it. And let's bake it and quickly talk about the temperatures. So that's upper bottom heat and 230 degrees Celsius right there. I am gonna be baking it like this until the core temperature of the dough reaches around 80 degrees Celsius. And then afterwards, I will remove the dough from the loaf pan and continue letting it bake until the core temperature reaches 95 degrees Celsius. And by using a thermometer, you will always nail baking your bread. It's like making a nice steak. Just use a thermometer. It's so much simpler, especially when using a loaf pan, because you never know how done the dough is on the inside. Anyway, so let's let this bake and I'm super excited to show you the final result. One thing that I don't like so much about this loaf pan, it has a few tiny holes at the bottom. Why would you want that? Oh well, gotta clean this up, and this sample here, I'm not throwing this away. I'm gonna be putting that into my surplus starter jar. We Germans, we would never throw anything away, so this is precious fermented dough and you can bake an amazing bread out of this. I'm gonna be linking this right here. Please do check that out. It's really my personal favorite bread. Wow, look at this. Around 40 minutes have passed and this is just looking amazing. But just to be sure, I'm gonna be keeping this lid covered for another 10 minutes and then let's try to measure the core temperature and flip this out. It still doesn't look like it's completely done. Hello again. Let's use the thermometer to check the internal temperature. Oh, would you see that? We are at around 70 degrees Celsius. So we need to wait until 80 and then we can take it out of the loaf pan. So this dough is definitely not done yet, and you can also see how sticky this is here on the thermometer. This needs more time, and this is probably the hardest part about baking in a loaf pan. It's hard to judge because this part looks already like I could possibly flip it over, but the center, nope, needs more time. I'm thinking probably another 20 minutes or so. Hello again, another 15 minutes passed. And let's check the temperature one more time. 75, around 80. So we can now take this out of the loaf pan and then just let it continue bake on the rack. If you wanted to have a completely soft bread, then you could also just completely let it finish bake inside here. But I just like it to have a little bit of coloring everywhere. Now comes the big moment of truth. Is this actually coming out of the loaf pan? Yes, it does. Nice. Amazing. Upsala. I just have to be a little bit careful. I don't want this to... Oops. And back into the oven. And voila. Our bread has been in the oven for another 10 minutes. And let's check the core temperature one more time. So we are at above 95 degrees Celsius. So this dough is done now. This is really the most reliable way to know that your dough is done. This makes it so simple. I'm going to let this sit overnight because it's already quite late now. And then in the morning, we are gonna have a look and slice this open. This definitely so far turned out so much better than I expected. With so little work, we made such an amazing bread. Let's see now if the flavor can also deliver. And voila, here is our final bread. I think from the coloring it looks very nice. It has good oven spring. Overall, I'm just super amazed with how simple this bread was to make and how good this is. This must have been not more than 3 minutes to make this bread. Let's slice this open and check how the crumb from the inside looks like. Note how this here collapsed just a little bit here. Yesterday evening it didn't look like that. Not sure what's the reason for it. Let's take a slice. And are you ready for it? Super nice, moist consistency. Indeed, it's very, very, very moist. Interestingly here, on the bottom, it looks just a tiny little bit gooey. It seems like we probably could have let it bake a little bit longer. Note how the pockets of air are not so big. And that's because we didn't really develop that gluten network so much. But here, very good. Let's give this a shot and taste it. It has this typical sourdough tang. Wow, the consistency of this bread, it's really perfect. This is so good. It just has this gooey taste to it, paired with a slight crisp crust here. I love it. And then all that flavor from the sourdough. This is a really amazing bread. Luckily, I still got a few slices left. So that's about it. That's the magic of this recipe. Overall, it only took me around 3 minutes to make, and I was really, really, really impressed. I figured let's have a look at a couple of more questions you might have. Question number 1, does this work with whole wheat as well? Yes, it definitely does work with whole wheat as well. But just like with any other flour, you want to have a high quality whole wheat flour. I'm linking all my flour in the description of the video. In fact, I personally really love the taste whole wheat flour adds to the final bread. The bran is just such an amazing ingredient. It gives your bread such a rustic, amazing taste. I would probably go for not as much as a size increase with the whole wheat version. So many of you have always asked me, hey Hendrik, could you please make a video on spelt flour? Yes, this recipe works with spelt flour as well. For spelt, there are two categories. There is old spelt and there is new spelt. Old spelt has properties similar to einkorn or emmer. New spelt is very close to modern wheat. So in general, when you are seeing a recipe that includes wheat flour and you're using modern spelt, then you can just replace the wheat flour typically one by one with spelt flour. Does it work with rye flour? Yes, indeed it does, and that's one of my favorite breads. Rye just has such an amazing taste to it. The dough is going to be a little bit more sticky, but regardless, you are going to make an amazing bread. Just replace the wheat flour with rye flour. Pretty much everything that you feed your starter, you can use for this recipe as well. Last but not least, liquid starter. I have been using a liquid starter, but you can definitely use any other sourdough starter that you have at hand. Just make sure that you have this sort of soupy consistency at the start. That's what you want to have in your dough. So every starter works. It's just a question of what you want in terms of taste. And after all, taste is the single most important result that you want to achieve on your bread. You want to have amazing taste. And every sourdough bread that you're making, regardless whether it's beautiful or not as beautiful, it's going to be amazing in terms of taste. That's what I really love about this hobby. Hope you enjoyed watching this video and I hope that you learned something new. What this recipe taught me is that sourdough bread can also be very simple. With just 3 minutes of work, we made an amazing bread. I would be super curious to hear your thoughts on the recipe. Please share it in the comments section. Now I'm sorry, but I always like to explain everything very much in detail. I think the why really helps to understand the whole process, especially with sourdough, where you always have to adjust to make everything work with your own process at home. So I would say what I'm teaching is not really a single recipe, but more of a framework. Okay, that was very engineering of me. We engineers always like to use frameworks. I wanted to make another version just out of this recipe, which really only is 3 minutes long to help with the YouTube algorithm. So that's what I'm gonna be doing next, taking the best moments from this, cutting that down to a 3-minute version. I would be super curious to hear which moments you think are the most important ones. Then we can make this video pretty much together. Please also drop your comment in the comment section. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. As always, may the gluten be with you.